Can you see my screen?
I can indeed, yeah.
All right, so it's saying that the screen sharing is paused, but apparently it's not, which is good. Hello, good morning, everyone. We'll be starting in a few minutes. Just letting others to join as well. All right, good morning, everyone. We're just waiting for 1, 2 more minutes to let everyone join. We'll go on mute for now, but bear with us. We'll be back in a minute. Alrighty, good morning, everyone. Just another 30 seconds and we'll start, all right? Bear with us. I still see that people are actively joining, so let's give them another 30 seconds. All right. I can see that we have already the critical mass of of joiners. So let's get it started. Welcome everyone, and good morning. Super happy to host this webinar today and open it. So essentially, we are talking today about demystifying data warehouse migrations, right? And essentially, the reason why we're doing these sessions is that whenever we're speaking about migrations with customers, it's always something that people on the other side of the screen or on the table are getting scared of, right? It's the beast which is always very difficult to tackle, right? It takes quite some time and efforts in the preparation stage, in the execution stage, in the post-execution stage to make sure that all the applications work correctly. And today we want to focus exactly on that, how to make sure that these beasts are being tackled in the best possible way, fast, on time, on budget, and all the users of the applications are happy and working in production as expected after it. And essentially, there are many, let's say, possible distractions and issues what can go wrong during the migration process. And today would love to focus on how to mitigate these risks and what today's, let's say, new world with AI and beautiful automations can offer us to simplify this process as much as possible. In the previous session, so that's one of the series, one of the sessions in the series of Migration Sprint, which we did with the partners. But today it will be different, right? We don't have partners. We have just purely our Databricks best of the breed people on the call. Olga is joining me from the Professional Services organization, managing our German enterprise team, and she will focus and bring us the experience both from the business and commercial lens. And Eowyn is our lead resident solution architect and the main brain behind our AI migration accelerator, which is a new, very rapidly developing recently thing, which we'll also show a bit today on our session. So bear with us. Please ask questions in the chat. We'll be actively monitoring and we'll be answering them as we go, basically. So let's make it a bidirectional communication channel. And whenever you have anything to ask, let us know. And I will also make sure that we have Q&A turned on as well. Awesome. With that, let's go with a short intro round. Olga, mic to you first.
Thank you so much and welcome everyone. Super excited to have this webinar. I really looking forward to that and hope it will be insightful for everyone who considers the data warehouse migration to Databricks regardless of the data source. Talking about myself, I'm Senior Engagement Manager, but for our professional services team, as Kirill mentioned, my focus lies in supporting our German enterprise customers. I always try to say that as for my personal role, I try to bridge the technology and the business stakeholders. And by every sometimes troubled and not so appealing exercise as data warehouse migration, which can be difficult and boring even sometimes to talk about, I always try to see the bigger picture, why we do that. And today, for me, it's a great opportunity to share these learnings, right? And hopefully maybe change even the mindset in terms of how we look at this migration, at least here at Databricks. I'm coming as a part of professional services team, and I always describe my team as this muscle at Databricks that helps to support our customers very practically with their most difficult initiatives on the Lakehouse, and data warehouse migration is apparently one of them. I should admit that maybe 60 or 70% of the engagements I oversee will be somehow to this or that extent related to data warehouse migrations. But enough about me. Jon, over to you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. I'm Owen. I'm a lead resident solutions architect. So I am part of professional services based in the UK. And yeah, I mean, I guess I get on the ground, nitty gritty with customers, getting hands on, supporting them through migrations, building tooling, as we'll kind of talk about later. And yeah, I've been through got a lot of scars and a lot of war stories from various migrations. So yeah, my main focus, I mean, generally professional services, we provide assurance, but you know, as that turns out in the day-to-day, we get hands-on, we figure out problems, we solve the edge cases. So I'm be talking to you today coming from that angle of one, like, yeah, how we can tackle those, and two, you know, some tooling and approaches that can maybe help on the journey.
Awesome. Thank you. So we have, as you can see, very, let's say, engaged migration process as people today call. And therefore, I would love to start also with a tricky one, as you're both experienced with multiple sources, multiple customer situations, and cases. And ask you a tricky one about the most difficult migrations that you have seen in your career, which maybe have failed or let's say were just hard to execute on, but eventually were successful. And whether you saw any pattern, repetitive one across those kind of migrations that you can highlight for the audience. Maybe Olga will start with you.
Yeah, I'll probably start, and thank you for this question. Just before I try to answer that, maybe a broader picture, right? I mean, of course, probably one of the expected answers would be that, hey, I don't know, Teradata migrations are more complex than Snowflake, and do this and don't do that, right? But let's be very, very honest. Just as I mentioned, right, many of my colleagues in professional services, right, and many of our partners, for them, migrations executions is bread and butter, right? They do that literally every day. That's my daily job, right? But for our customers, many of them will approach data warehouse migrations probably once in a lifetime, maybe two, maybe three. So it's a single exercise, right? And I think the narrative that just only if we talk about the technological complexity and, for instance, considering Microsoft SQL migration to Databricks a little bit, I don't know, lighter or less difficult than Teradata migration, somewhat can be not entirely true from customers' perspective, right? Just to answer your question, what can be the repetitive patterns? And again, my team sometimes handle the migrations which are off track, which are really already horror stories, right? When the customers didn't have, for instance, enough planning, didn't engage with the right partner at the beginning, or were over optimistic in terms of that they have all needed expertise on their end. And it was, as we say, it went south. It's not, let's say, that uncommon, to be honest. But in terms of, for instance, the personal stories, I would say not sometimes not only technological difficulties and technological challenges makes the migration complex. I would also say that sometimes it's stakes and sometimes it's organizational dynamics. So that would be my answer.
What do you mean by stakes exactly?
By stakes, I mean the business perspective. So let me take a very concrete example of one of our German enterprise customers in retail industry. I wouldn't mention the name there, but one of our stakeholders, one of our champions at Databricks, literally put the career and his personal success on the idea of having Databricks serving as the core, as the heart of their future unified data platform. And apparently this implied the migration from different sources there. They contacted the professional services team and we executed this migration in very, very aggressive timeline. And super important, the customer was also learning Databricks as they were going. It was a complex setup because of the timeline, but also because of the parties involved. There were partners, there was an in-house team who also required enablement to Databricks. There was also the hyperscalers team who was supporting, right? So in these regards, what helped us to achieve that apparently was very strict governance. And by governance, I mean not project management or change management, but also technological governance, technological oversight and ownership, right, which was provided by our team. But this was also the example of the project where you literally feel these stakes, as I call them, right? Because someone's career, and not only on the one person, really depends on the success of the execution. And you can see this pressure on one hand. On the other hand, you also see the opportunity. You also see how, just as in a magic story, all these teams who are separate have different mindsets, different even time zones allocation, right? And different strengths and weaknesses. They try to form something which is truly unique and operates as the well-oiled machine, not at the beginning, but with time. So this is something which I mean by high stakes. And with organizational dynamics, that's another story. And let's be also realistic. Many of the German enterprises and companies are coming not from not the most beautiful and successful time. There are layoffs, there are also job cuts everywhere. And for instance, currently we work on a few migrations where apparently our customers and the teams of customers and are affected with this situation. And again, in my opinion, we always are very outcome-oriented and result-oriented, and as we call it, customer-obsessed. We'll find a way when, for instance, we need to deal with, scope changes and changes of priorities. But the psychological aspect and organizational dynamics, which are hard to be impacted by Databricks and hard to be even sometimes owned by the customer, introduce the challenges which I would say 2 or 3 times harder than just let's manage the change request or the scope. That's how I see that.
Awesome, thank you. I'll definitely would love to get it deeper a bit into some of the best practices. But Owen, maybe some scary stories from your side.
Yeah. I think, I mean, it echoes a lot of what Olga said, but I think some of the big challenges. I mean, the obvious thing is scope, right? I've been in migrations where the scope was never clear from the outset. We're going to migrate this whole database, but what are we doing? What are we migrating? What can we throw? What's throwaway? And getting clarity on scope up front and really locking in, a decision matrix of these are the things we need to move, these are the things we need to deprecate, these are the things that we're in scope, and agreeing that with the customer, because I think one of the key parts is, right, so often we're working with a technical team running a migration, but they will have an internal customer that they are delivering this migration to, right? And making sure they're part of that journey. Often the scope is agreed on a technical side, we're moving this database, but how that impacts the users, what the scope is in terms of getting them trained, what the scope is in terms of getting them, what are their use cases, what are their reports, how are they going to use this migrated platform, and getting that locked in as part of that scope and planning is really key. I've seen that go really off the rails where the migration's done. The technical team sort of said, yes, we did it. It's a success. And their customer, their user base were like, what is this? This is, this makes no sense to us. So, I think it is, the migration is not a technical, challenge alone. Bringing users on the journey. Maybe not a war story, but quite an interesting case in the account I'm working in right now, where they had a migration last year. It went so badly on exactly that issue of like, when they delivered it to the user base, they just hated it, and they hadn't been kept on the journey. And now they've completely pivoted to, champions are part of the pods who are delivering the migration. They are involved in the actual rewriting of code. So it's giving them a sense of ownership of what is being migrated. It isn't like I'm the customer and you're delivering to me. It's I'm part of this journey. And even though I'm not as technical, I'm more business focused, they can really feel involved, feel part of it, and I really feel like it's getting them a better outcome. So that's probably the main thing I always think about is what are we migrating? What exactly are we migrating? And we'll talk maybe a bit about the planning side later on. But also, how do I bring my customers? Who are my customers in the business that I'm delivering to? How do we bring them on the journey? How do we make sure they're happy? How do we make sure they're getting the outcomes that they need out of this? It isn't just a technical exercise.
Right. And I think overall, to be honest, the trend on the market is that this line between business and IT is disappearing slowly but steadily. And I think this is the key to success, essentially, to involve the users early in the stage to also co-design and co-own the future platform. Absolutely. As we're demystifying meat today on the call, right? One of the objections and let's say trends or ideas even from some of the customers which I have observed is then when we speak about really complex migrations, right? So which go beyond just a relational database, and we're speaking about the proper enterprise data warehouse. Let's say one of the de-risking let's say measures is to increase the team rapidly, the development team, either by involving the partners or grow an internal organization or involving some other data teams which were not engaged before in exactly data warehouse part. Is throwing additional, let's say, workforce does it help essentially to streamline or accelerate already stalled migrations? Olga, from your experience.
Thank you for that. Indeed, that's one of, let's say, the myths we deal daily in our conversations, right? And I think there are different flavors to that, right? So let's take an example where basically you need additional people, right? Because this specific Databricks expertise or specific expertise in terms of the migrations, if, for instance, you're not lucky to have that in-house, because I would assume it's primarily supporting of the business, primarily business, right, of our customers, right? And sometimes this expertise may be missing within house teams. I think it's absolutely right, and it's absolutely good approach to engage with, for instance, professional services or the partners with the right expertise to fill in these gaps. That's the only way to go. However, if we talk about, okay, don't have the migration, we estimated it will take 12 months. Let's, I don't know, increase the headcount because we calculate it would help us. I would say it's somewhat the approach we wouldn't follow, or at least recommend. I will elaborate a little bit more how we try professional services actually work on the opposite. Reduce the, let's say, manpower when it's needed, the manual effort, right, by accelerating the migration in a little bit different narrative by using as well also the tool set that we have and the learnings that we have. And it's also, I think, many of these in terms of how many people and on what expertise we engage, much depends on the correct migration planning and the migration design. What do I mean by that? Further on, I will tell you how we as Databricks see, let's say, our recommended framework of approaching data warehouse migrations. And depending on the phases and the execution, it would make sense to ramp up or ramp down the team as needed with regards to the specific tasks and activities that you will be executing, right? But it starts with the proper planning there with regards to the tool set, also accelerators that you guys can use, and of course the approach, right? Because many of our migrations will be not, let's say, lift and shift and or modernization right away, but rather some hybrid approach to make sure that if we have any critical timelines, for instance, decommissioning of the previous data source or no need for license prolongation, right? This type of, let's say, business-driven milestones we need to hit. we plan it accordingly, right? But again, I think it strengthens your previous narrative in terms of let's make sure that we treat data warehouse migration not purely as a technical exercise, but basically connected with a business need, with the business stakeholders and sponsors from the day zero.
Exactly. And also, and I'll say, this you touched slightly on this, right? Lift and shift, or let's say the combination of lift and shift and modernization. There's always something to be planned early enough so that during the execution stage there are no questions raised on this, whether we need to rewrite this particular application or actually move it as is. But this is all needs to be done before actually the migration physically starts itself. So fully agree here.
Just to add a point.
Yeah.
Just to add a point on the team scaling and getting people in place and how you ramp up. I mean, I think, is it Martin Fowler, the ThoughtWorks approach of like, there's a 2-week hit of before you add someone to a team and they actually add value. So I think that's key part of the planning as well, right? If you are going to scale out, incorporating that into the plan, making sure that there's an onboarding plan, there's an approach in terms of scaling out the team, that you don't want to be in the position that you're at the end of the migration, you got a deadline because licenses are going to go away, and you fall into the trap of thinking, well, I can add 30 more people here and it will actually increase the throughput or will accelerate. So I think, again, back to Olga's point of getting things planned properly, knowing when you need to ramp up, how you need to ramp up, and incorporating that kind of like ramp up or onboarding planning into that, and accepting there's going to be that lead time of ramping up your team as you go through it.
Yes, fully agree here. And I'll say, as we speak about the preparation stage, there is also one step before that is actually why customers, why the topic of migration on its own rises. And whenever we have, let's say, a customer saying that we want to migrate off an XYZ legacy data warehouse platform, what usually are the main drivers for the decision, and how you can tell, for example, that this is a well thought and let's say well justified decision, and maybe there is still some time needed to actually scope better and find maybe some other solutions?
Well, 100% in more than half of the cases, it will be cost reduction. So total cost of ownership reduction, right? Reduction of the running cost, reduction of the associated cost. At least in my practice, this is literally, number one reason, number one main motivation why many of our customers consider that, right? And again, it's not uncommon. There are a lot of the public stories, and there are also a lot of the real examples of our customers in Germany and worldwide, where 50, 60, sometimes even 90% TCO reduction compared to the previous one are achievable, right? You'll be able to find them on our website. But here's also the trick. If we start to look into the data warehouse migration exercise only from cost perspective, there is a risk that we may be missing the broader picture. And the broader picture there, and I try to collect on the next slide, let's say probably main directions in terms of where we basically see the primary motivation in terms of the of our customers to migrate to Databricks. The ones who tend to be successful with the data warehouse migrations are the ones who frame the migration around a strategic outcome, right? So it's not, let's say, only cost reduction, but also what are the missing capabilities which currently the existing data estate doesn't offer to the teams. For instance, AI enablement. How fast are the teams with regards to not only AI usage in their daily jobs on the sake of AI, but for instance, also for the future cases that they may not be looking into? What are the productivity gains? Because apparently, if the data teams, if the platform teams have to operate in the siloed data estate, they have to deal with some of the overheads, right? Is it optimized? Is it the most efficient? And what can be the productivity gains? This can be another story, right? And with regards to governance and apparently risk assurance, right? Specifically for regulated customers, specifically for some of the domains like fintech or medical sphere, right? What is the cost of the mistake here? our current security and permission model really answers the needs from regulatory, for instance, and so on, right? And compliant with the requirements, right? And how this can be simplified or changed by still staying compliant. And I think this is exactly what drives typically the business discussions around what actually the migration brings to us, apart only, let's say, 30, 40, or whatever the number is in terms of the cost reduction there. Ion, what's your experience?
Yeah, I agree. It's cost, right? It's generally, you know, the driver is we're spending way too much on licenses. I am seeing some more, like some recent ones. Agility has come up a few times where the legacy system, it's on premise, it doesn't scale, it's hard to, you know, have the right tooling around it. That's kind of come up a fair bit. But yeah, generally we see cost. But I absolutely agree, Olga. Like the trying to unlock what the actual value add the migration will bring is key. Making sure that customers understand that, you know, what are the outcomes here? Is the outcome reducing costs, or is it that getting that agility? What does that agility mean? Is it spinning up agentic systems? Is it being AI ready? Is it having better governance? Where are the other kind of pain points in the org that can lead to that? So cost can often be the trigger, but then finding those other outcomes can help you tailor how the migration will work as well as you go through it. So yeah, but yeah, that's definitely what I'm seeing more recently. One customer recently, they started the migration, they migrated one domain, and then they had to respond to some current world events, lots changing. And once they still had that domain migrated, they were able to be so reactive to what was going on. It's really put the pressure on the team to get all these other domains migrated, which has actually helped the customer justify, you know, more resource to try and accelerate, which is a pretty cool outcome.
Yes, I fully agree. And also, I would say, you know, the cost is a big issue, right? From the perspective that modernization itself is a project, not only complex, but also costly. And there's always a question how to balance, let's say, the cost of maintaining, right? And going more into legacy with time and being limited on certain areas versus, let's say, having this investment happen with a clear path to value and return on investment. So I would say, what probably are your best practices that you can give a hint to our attendees today, how to help decrease the costs of migrations? What can be done, let's say, that this modernization is becoming less expensive from your experience?
I'll probably start. So number one, and the baseline is always to set up, let's say, the foundations, the comparison model. So this being said, of course, the customer is well aware in terms of how much costs do they currently carry, right? So it's important that we have this baseline. But number two, even before we achieve or approach an immigration, we always try to collect all the data behind, let's say, the existing complexity of their data estate, right? Trying to have the metrics, trying to understand the volume metrics and associated costs, and let's say the projected future total cost of ownership on Databricks. Again, we do have the tool set. We'll show them during this webinar in terms of how to make it in a data-driven fashion, but this already helps us to have pretty good and accurate, let's say, approximation and design in terms of the future, right? So if the wall exercise make the point, right? Let's plan that and let's try to answer this question before we start investing any single penny in that. So that would be number one. Number two, when basically the main decision makes sense and we have, let's say, the buy-in in terms of executing this migration, right? So apparently, how we do that in a smart way. Kirill, you had this question, right? Let's throw 50 people theoretically, right? To make sure that we have 5x time increase. Is it the right approach? Well, of course, we really need to see it and to calculate what is the, let's say, the business case, as we call it, behind it. But another angle to look into that, and this is probably what professional services can also bring, how we can actually reduce the manpower, how we can reduce both, let's say, the needed costs of the services to execute this migration from any of the angles, yeah? But let's put it aside from the partners, from in-house team and so on, and time allocation, but also still try to achieve the faster time to value, faster time to market, let's say, or in other words, finalize the migration. And this is where the intellectual property that Databricks Professional Services, our partner landscape are bringing, right, but as well as the open sources with regards to, yes, how we can accelerate it. Different agentic accelerators that we have and we'll be demonstrating today, Lakebridge, maybe some of them already heard or even tried it, to accelerate the manual part conversion will come handy.
And I think just to add on to that as well, like TCO is one nice metric. One, when I was actually a customer, so I was a customer before I joined Databricks, and I did a migration off our legacy platform to Databricks. And one of the key value points I was able to articulate there was actually like developer and user productivity. So while TCO was a nice metric, we were able to also demonstrate that if we migrate, we will save, X person hours a week trying to run various analytics. We can, again, show a cost saving in not just the bottom line on what infrastructure is costing or TCO is costing, but actually, how much value we can unlock on the business side, where, we can answer questions faster. And one part, I'll just give a quick shout out, the Databricks business value team are phenomenal to help articulate those those savings and build something that can actually you can go back to your CTOs or your CEOs and articulate not just, hey, the bottom line is decreasing, but we're also going to see these productivity gains.
Absolutely agree with that. So that's one of the, let's say, hints and call to actions for the audiences that just partner also does, right? We have plenty of experience with the different types of migrations. We can help not only, let's say, accessing the complexity of the process and the potential, let's say, resources needed, but also help to create the proof of value case to present for the stakeholders. In terms of, let's say, the question which might arise now, as we talked and focused on the migrations in the first bit, is essentially where exactly the professional services can help and what is the difference that we as an organization can bring to the customers as well. And obviously there are many other follow-up questions rising around, okay, what exactly is the scope of responsibilities, how to differentiate, how to combine professional services and the partners if there's already one in place, right? And how to eventually get started. So maybe Olga, question to you, how do you formulate and position this to our customers now?
With pleasure. Professional services and all these are very, very relevant questions. And I really always try to explain that why do we exist, yeah? And although we are called professional services, we are not a classical service business. We're a pretty small team, a team of practitioners who are bringing not only the highest technological advisory and architectural expertise that I'm very proud to work with my colleagues here, and we can bring on your project, right? But apparently the in-house Databricks knowledge, access to product engineering team, and so on. In essence, just not to be salesy, right? But the mission why professional services exist in Databricks is making sure that every investment you put in Databricks platform really brings you the value you were expected to get. And of course, professional services, and as you know, Databricks, we are developing the platform more in low code, no code capabilities, right? So many of the business users and can use it without any specific, let's say, knowledge, not being techies at all, right? Not even having SQL knowledge with them at all, yeah? So these self-service capabilities are definitely taking place. And for instance, you won't need professional services for that. Not maybe sometimes even the partner, but sometimes there are really complex things. For instance, data warehouse migrations. For instance, building CDP, right? For instance, maybe AI initiatives or agentic architecture, set of agents that you are building, where basically you would consider externalizing with the partners and professional services. I really love this pyramid, yeah, because when we just narrowing it down in terms of these complex initiatives we have on the Lakehouse, apparently this pyramid may look different, and much depends in terms of the in-house team, the historical setup, the expertise that the team has themselves, and the knowledge around Databricks and around the domain area. And of course, you may see the ranges, for instance, of engaging in-house team, of engaging industrial business consultancies, extension partners, right? Offshore can be really, really different. But what we see as the common pattern of success across this complex engagement is that single digit of professional services, up to 10% engagement, really ensures that all this pyramid you see below it is working as the machine, right? We ensuring that all the architectural decisions are being validated and accommodate not only, let's say, best practices in terms of Databricks development, but also, for instance, upcoming roadmap of the features, right? So that we are not reinventing the wheel if in 2 or 3 months this feature will be available publicly for our customers there. And I think you also raised a very, very common actually question, right? What does it mean, professional services? Do you guys compete with the partners? No, by no means. Professional services complement the partners ecosystem. We are a partner-first business at Databricks, right? And we have a very rich, I would say, landscape of the partners who are proficient in these or that areas, right? But professional services, making sure we provide exactly these in-house expertise of Databricks and the governance across all the parties, whatever the setup on the exact project are, to make sure it is the success there. So what is also probably important, just again, maybe just to reemphasize, professional services narrative is, to be honest, being the service line of Databricks business, we exist not because of, let's say, commercial purposes, right? We exist to make sure that our customers utilize the platform in the best possible shape and form that suits their needs and that suits their project objectives, right? And that's why with our engagement, we always challenge and try to bring on the table this extend narrative. What do we mean by that? Extend reduction, let's say, of the manual effort, reduction, for instance, non-optimal solutions on the setups, where it makes sense. As a very concrete example, different developments, different tool set that we're bringing with ourselves. For instance, in the case of data warehouse migrations, it can be accelerators on the reconciliation, on the data conversion, on the assets conversion, and so on. And we have seen the stories up to 90% of manual effort on these specific areas can be automated. Cool, isn't that? That's exactly what we bring with ourselves. And of course, it's not selling licensing of any additional tool set. It comes for free for our customers, as long as we have the assurance and professional services make sure that this tool set is being used exactly on the right needs of that. So with these regards, I would probably answer this question exactly this way. And another maybe example of this another tool set we can bring is different ways to automate the pipeline, different ways to automate the medallion architecture design. Of course, all of these sometimes experimentally, and those are not silver bullets. So far, I think the dream to have 100% driven by agents and automated migration is still a dream. However, Ion, I know that you, with your development, trying to come to this dream closer and closer. We'll come to that. But that's I think at the end of the day, the value that professional services bring in with all of our engagements there.
Yes. And I'll say that I can just highlight and echo that we love our partners, right? And we love to partner with them, especially in the complex projects, which take a lot of time and resources. And essentially, especially the certified ones, right? So also if you don't have a certified, or let's say if you don't have a partner yet for Databricks projects, always don't hesitate to reach out to the account team. They will suggest some of the experienced partners in exactly your source system, your specific project, and help to, let's say, give a choice, a selection of few ones that yet you might choose which best fits your culture and, let's say, your expectations as well. And essentially, the professional services, Olga, you mentioned a lot of different benefits and expertise and access to engineering and knowledge of the product roadmap and, let's say, hands-on experience working on different scale of the projects. So there's always a question which then arises usually somewhere at the end of these conversations is that the professional services at the end is still quite an expensive service. So what do you usually tend to, so it doesn't come, let's say, at a small cost, all of these benefits. So how do you usually answer this question to the customers, how you position it?
100%. We are not the cheapest. And probably if we talk about, let's say, some of the rates, we'd rather consider them expensive. But so expensive is the failed migration. So expensive is all the risks that unfortunately are realized. In many of my conversations, there are two types of the customers. the first type would approach to us at the beginning, from the planning and so on. And to be honest, we never have these conversations in terms of what was the cost of mistake. What was the cost of not engaging, right? We just don't explore this scenario because if we see the risk, we try to mitigate it and address it with our engagement. But sometimes there are stories. And actually, Kirill, over to you. Out of, let's say, 10 migrations, what's your take? How many of them will be off track to this or that extent? Just a guess.
Yes. I would say 4 or 5-ish. There will be challenges of different scale, let me put like this.
Yeah, depending what the source is, because there is, let's say, some of the research behind it, right? It's more. It's from 5 to 7 to this or that extent, right? And again, the extent is somewhat different. But what I mean, it's not, let's say, challenges how to do things, but rather already the signals that the migration went off track by budget expectations or by timeline, which was planned there, right? So in these regards, what are the costs associated with that, right? And how our professional services basically bring the value and justifies the value is exactly making sure that that our customers are not running into that. This being said, a professional services engagement is on average this single-digit % line item in this multi-million euro migration program. Done right, it pays for itself in de-risking for over 90% plus of the spend, right? Done wrong, skipped, or I don't know, probably just had it very, very slim. And then you're putting at risk, right, the entire program for external partner or in-house team with sometimes some of the gaps on the architectural decisions, right, or anything like that. Super important point there is, again, I always encourage my customers to treat the broader picture, right? To understand the objective we are trying to get out of this migration, right? And this is with regards, I'm not a big fan of, let's say, any rate card discussions. Why? Because of this external initiative, how I can measure the impact of proprietary IP, for instance, like Lake Bridge, or any other accelerators we're bringing in there. Again, these are coming to no cost of our customers, but this is also the value where we saw, and it's not an anecdote, in terms of 5x time reduction of the migration, or 5x time reduction in terms of the manual spend and manual cost of the people who will be doing that, right? So this is another angle to look into that, right? And probably finally to mention, there are ways to invest. And I actually always encourage, let's try to understand the bigger picture and let's try to find the solution on how we make it happen. For instance, there are ways, and Databricks Professional Services are eligible for different hyperscaler funds, right? For instance, and I'm the right person, for instance, to drive these type of discussions. There are also ways how Databricks invest in your journey, right? By providing complementary professional services, right? On some of the particular capabilities. With all these pieces of the puzzle, of course, it's not a silver bullet, and don't get me wrong that I'm over-promising, but it's my daily job to compare sometimes and provide second opinion in terms of the migration proposals done by, let's say, external vendors or, I don't know, in-house team and so on. Sometimes I literally saw, with all of our expensive rates, let me put it this way, the overall cost of migration, which was not only on the paper, but also realized, come cheaper.
So it's always, let's say, worth to do a small math calculation, let's say. But let's say it's not just only the math calculation, right? It's also a quick assessment whether the customer is ready to actually get started on the journey. So is there any special checklist, right, that you go through to, let's say, when doing this also scoping calculation, also assessing, okay, is actually the customer ready to get started with migration?
100%. And there is no, like, let's say, checklist per se, but rather because every migration is different. It's always custom, and I'm not a big fan of trying to make something universal, right? But if I'm about to maybe talk about like common signals of the readiness, and this is exactly what happens in the first very, very initial assessment or discovery phase, right? Just to make sure that number A, we made the work and we calculated the metrics, and at least we have the plan in terms of what it may cost, how we'd love to approach it on the very probably initial stage. That's number one. Number two, to have executive sponsorship in the game, right? Because apparently data engineers, typically analysts, right, and people who work with the platforms, they are super, super keen and typically, in my experience, very open to for the innovation that Databricks platform brings, right? But of course, without sponsorship, without the budget holder, right, without the decision from the business, this can't just remain a dream. So super important to have the business outcome and the respective sponsor in the game on this one. Also important is to have the right expertise or be super, super honest. If, for instance, in-house team can handle specific tasks on Databricks, right, and on the migration, super awesome. If not, and the expertise is missing, do we have a plan or at least initial ideas how we fill these gaps? Be it partners, be it enablement strategy, be it professional services. So there are different ways there, right? And probably the last one, and this is sometimes underrated, right? We need to have the honest conversation about which legacy system we are going to turn off, when, the milestones, and also exactly these business outcomes. Is it realistic or is it over-promising based on the, as you rightly mentioned, mathematical exercise, first approximation exercise, we made it, right? And then if we already have the signals that for some reason it's not viable, how we plan around this. Again, I think if we have 3 out of these 5 points, I think we're already in good shape and we can start, right? We thought about them. If we have 4 or more, then we have very, very high chances to succeed.
Yes. And in terms of the starting, right? So we're starting the migration journey, and how does it typically look like for the customers?
Very, very good. Maybe we can go to some of the next slides where I tried to present, I think the next one, where I tried to present, let's say, yes, this migration journey. And again, this is the recommended flow by Databricks, right, that we try typically to approach data warehouse migrations. Sometimes there might be fluctuations to this journey, right, or sometimes the customer already reach out to us, not at the beginning, but during the execution, right? And in this regards, we need to be creative and approach it. But if I'm about to come up with some universal journey, it will be these 5 stages. We start with source platform assessment. We continue with solution design. Then we do migration strategy and planning, migration plan validation, and full-scale migration and basically code conversion through our audit. So as you may see, before I dive into the details of every of these phases, first 3 phases are somewhat planning, right? And sometimes I hear the feedback from our customers, wow, isn't that too much? Because when the real work starts, and by the real work, typically the first pipelines conversion or the dashboard conversion, right? It's something that what is expected by the definition of real work. But let me try to untangle that. Just as I mentioned, the arithmetical exercise in terms of outlining the business case inventory, right? Outlining, okay, what it could be with regards to efforts approximation. The TCO there would be source platform assessment. Super, super important there is that we try to have the first vision in terms of what we are trying to achieve from business perspective, what could be the target architecture, what can be the approach, or at least in high level talk about like these particular gaps. From very first phase on the source platform assessment, we already incorporate our tool set. And this is the tool set which is valuable regardless of professional services or not. Dear customers, if you consider migration, please reach out to account team because we do have this tool set available with regards to understanding the current and future costs of ownership, the running cost on Databricks on your current data system, right? And this is super, super important information to outline the business case, right? Further on, it also with Lakebridge Analyzer, we are able to dive a little bit more in terms of the volume metrics. In other words, what stands behind the complexity of your current data estate? How many ETLs? What is their really t-shirt sizes, right? Or low, medium, high complexity? What are the SQL assets you have, SSIS packages, and so on and so forth? Why this helps? This helps with regards to staying data-driven from the very, very first phases and not making the wrong assumptions, but use the data in terms of justifying exactly this timeline, team composition, and the migration delivery, let's say, approach there. Let's move next, the solution design. Super, super important phase. And again, we need to be sure that we are aligned with the business on the target platform. We are aligned also in terms of their expectations, right? And not making just wrong assumptions, or I would put them isolated assumptions, keeping only in mind only technical picture, right? So of course, network, security architecture, governance, right? Compliance requirements, performance requirements, this technical greedy details are coming into the place. But super, super important is that we speak with the business right away, just trying to understand what gaps do they see and what are their wishes they look for. Number 3 would be outlining based on the learnings, the migration strategy and planification. Again, preparational exercise, and by the narration of real work, this is still assessment work. This is still design work. But this is exactly as the outcome of this phase, we expect to have the migration plan. Typically, migration plan would imply some of the phases used with regards to assessment, POCs, MVPs, and so-called wave approach. We are a big fans and we are big adopters to whatever extent this is possible to move in an agile way. This being said, we are trying to prioritize either business first, like for instance, we prioritize end-to-end use cases to whatever extent it's possible, or ETL first, when we rather focus on the pipeline and prioritization of the pipelines migration, right? But in increment or waves fashion. What does that mean and how does this help us during the architecture design? This helps us primarily to establish early feedback loops. The way it typically works is after the wave is accomplished, we have the user acceptance testing and the validation, right? So we establish the feedback loop again with the users of the platform, with the future users of the platform. And we incorporate these learnings without waiting until the very, very, let's say, waterfallish execution of the migration when we have the validation and UAT phase. Again, this helps us to adjust the planning on the fly as needed during the migration execution. Super important is that also on this phase, we talk through not only, let's say, what are the parties involved, right? And exactly what, for instance, is the headcount during the specific migration phase, but also we talk about what do we need from the customer. And sometimes this is a part which is missing because, well, sometimes the customers have approached migrations and they are well aware that this requires also investment of effort from our end and from their end. And by investment of effort, I mean not development effort, right? But rather subject matter expertise, domain expertise. We really need stakeholders and sponsorship to whom we talk, to whom we can validate, to making sure that we also have the time allocated and investment allocated from our customers to make sure that they perform user acceptance testing, that they also are available for questions and answers, right, and validation of what we have. But typically, yes, sometimes it also can be a hybrid setup when we work with the engineering folks from our customers, right? And then we really embed and we are deployed as a part of this extended team, as it was in the example of a retail customer that I was providing at the very, very beginning. Because at the end of the day, in this regards, the borders between the team are a bit eliminated, right? I would say that we act as the single organism there in the hybrid setup, bringing exactly what is our expertise and the strengths on every of the plate. But let's move next. During phase 3, we most likely already identified the tool set and let's say the plan, but still it's on the paper. Still it's hypothesis. We probably have conducted some of, let's say, maybe demos or probably some of the fail and tries runs in terms of the tool set, but super important. Before, again, the real work starts in this definition, we have a small, typically quite a short phase in terms of the migration plan validation. And typically this falls into couple of weeks, 4 up to 6 weeks, I would say, typically running the POC or MVP, exactly validating all of our assumptions made. This is where the first pipelines, this is where the first assets are being converted. And we're validating, for instance, did our planning process with regards to automation curve of the tool set, right, proved itself? Did we answer the question, can we do that? Or were our assumptions a little bit incorrect? And again, I envision there might be the question, 4 phases, wow, guys, when you do the development, are we talking here about 2, 3 years or 12 years migration? Not at all. Believe me or not, first 3 phases can literally be achieved within 2, 3 weeks, sometimes up to 4 weeks of engagement. And it's super important that we are aligned on the light of the approach and on the parties there. Migration plan validation could be from 2 to 6 weeks. So basically within first 90 days, I would say, we typically approach all these 4 phases, well, as a majority, I would say, providing that there is a customer interest and providing that the pace that we are moving is also being shared with the partner and with the customer team. And finally, the most interesting part, the real work, full-scale migration. Just as I mentioned, we typically do that in increments, and this implies basically the heavy lifting. We are big fans that heavy lifting is being executed by the partners and by in-house team because they basically train. If we talk about in-house team expertise, they're being trained and they learn how to then further on they will be working with Databricks, right? We do engage partners because also of making sure that the migration exercise is cost efficient for our customers with this regards, right? And this is exactly where all the acceleration tool set we are bringing and all the learnings from our documented in our delivery service kits and in other frameworks that we bring on the table are being followed and being executed there. Of course, this phase also implies the validation and user acceptance testing from the customer, but this is basically a rather execution phase where, to be honest, our engagement is not that intense. Typically, during this phase, we may provide the oversight and governance support, but if all the previous phases were planned correctly, you probably won't need too much of the professional services intense support during full-scale migration.
And I'll say, to be honest, with such a long preparation time, we're from what I observed from the projects, right? It's always to assess, okay, whether we need to actually migrate everything, right? Or maybe some pieces of the code are just dead code and they're don't need to be migrated at all. So essentially, by spending so much time in the initial stages, we make sure that the future architecture is also future proven, but also that we don't bring this legacy, let's say, years of non-optimized, non-overseen code to the new platform as well.
100%, like tables from, I don't know, 2015 or 20000, right? Something like that. Sometimes our customers are super surprised that actually the volume metrics, just if we do it literally as an arithmetic exercise, is not the whole scope that has to be migrated, right? And by running, for instance, like Rich Analyzer, this is something that really helps us to identify what actually is not in scope of migrating effort at all. Boom.
Yes. And so in terms of the code, it's clear, right? So we need to, let's say, descope it as much as possible in the initial stages and then convert it ideally within, let's say, optimization and tailoring towards the new platform design. But what about the data, right? Because usually the customers are asking, okay, do we need actually to clean the data and prep it for the migration first before actually going to the conversion, or it can be done afterwards as part of the, let's say, ETL stages, right, during the data ingestion. So, Eowyn, maybe from your experience, how do you usually recommend your customers to approach this?
It depends, is the question, right? Like it really is about use case. You know, I always think of it from what's the use case? Do you need historical data? Are you doing year-on-year reporting? Are you doing some sort of look back? And you know, is it does it make sense to, you know, can I just lift and shift this data into Databricks wholesale? So we lift the last 3 years in and then we start from ETL point A. That happens a lot for legacy data warehouses, but indeed some patterns we see, again, the migration I'm on at the moment, you know, their pipelines are, you know, not relying on historical data. So we've decided we're going to save a bunch of time, archive that data, keep it somewhere we can look at it, but we don't have to do the work of integrating it on top of existing tables, if that makes sense. So it really depends, but I think it's one of the most underestimated part of a migration plan. We focus on code conversion, we focus on building new pipelines, and often the sort of, you know, again, if you think of war stories, the kind of what do we do with the data? How do we get the data in? Is problematic. Thankfully, Databricks now, we have things like Lakeflow Connect, so getting data into Databricks from some systems is much easier. And you know, I think it's always got to be part of that planning. Like, what do you need? Which data do you need? How much data do you need? What are your like critical assets that where you need to do look back? And again, part of that descoping exercise is really important. Do we need to migrate everything? We can lift and shift the data we want, archive the rest. So it's something that we definitely try and think about and ask about early, and we try and scope it to the use case and how the customer wants to use the data, rather than kind of just take the approach we need to migrate everything, because that can be a headache.
Right. And okay, so then if we spend that much time on the preparation stage, which is absolutely justified and this is a well spent time, what is actually the more or less percentage of both code conversion and validation stages afterwards, which are actually the stage 4 and 5 of the migration journey that Elga was shown before?
So I think, code conversion is probably only about 20% of the journey, right? It's there's tooling. We'll show some tooling. We have Lakebridge. It's the kind of the easy part now, especially with agentic systems. The rest of the time, 60-70% is validation. And that comes in multiple flavors of, validating the code is still doing what you expect the code to do. But also validating, the business outcomes are the same, the numbers in the reports look the same, and getting that UAT cycle in there too. So the your customer of the migration needs to validate that. So I think you start thinking about then, are you getting the same output? Do you know what the tolerances are? You agree tolerances. Do you have the right SMEs to review the data? We try and think about automating a lot of that too. We have things like DQX or Lakebridge reconciliation, Lakebridge reconcile, sorry, to help on that journey. But you've got to get it to the users. And then of course, part of validation is running it in parallel, right? You kind of want to make sure that, there's some degree of parallel run on your old system and your new system to make sure that you are able to cut over. So, but you got to time box that, right? You can't parallel run forever. Your costs are going to be crazy running two systems in parallel. But yeah, definitely I see that validation is the biggest part of it and the most important part. And we can automate a lot, but it's still, the heavy lifting.
Yes. And I'll say that's also one of the benefits of the professional services, how to ensure that this parallel time of running a new system next to the old one is actually as minimum as possible. And this, let's say, cutover happens without damaging the production applications, right? And without surprising the user base that they have overnight, a completely new interface to work with. So that's exactly all of these prep stages as well to enable the users actually also to access the interface, the new interface and the new, let's say, even if it's coming with the organizational change as well. More, for example, customers are now usually, for example, going to the mesh architecture, self-service. So it's also organizational change, which needs to be managed in parallel to the technical execution of the migration and so on. Ewan, you mentioned a lot about the tooling, right? And I think that's also one of the items where the professional services just, let's say, combines all the expertise and let's say all of the maybe sometimes failures and the successes into something that we help with is every single migration we executed better and without, let's say, the previous mistakes. Can you talk about more, maybe show also our guest today, what do we have as Databricks for our customers to help manage the migration process?
Sure. If you cut forward, I think it's a couple of slides. We obviously have Lakebridge. So Lakebridge is our primary tool. It's open source. It's available for anyone to download and use. And if you're starting a migration or you're thinking about a migration, this is definitely where we think you should start with. Where we have profilers, so understand like usage, how much, where tables are being used, how tables are being used. Then we have the code conversion part, which is starting to become agentic, and some of what I'll show later is maybe a step further of that. But Lakebridge out of the box has agentic capabilities, and it generates ready code for you. And then we have the migration component. So again, we talked about Lakeflow Connect, so getting data into Databricks from your legacy system. And then lastly, there's a reconciler. So when you need to validate your tables across both systems. So right now we support a suite here. You can see there's some big players here that we can tackle. But when it comes to tooling and certainly how we think about it in PS, there's always edge cases. There's always things that don't fit, the standard, this is an open source tool. This is something we push out to thousands of customers. When we're on a migration, we do see the edge cases. And so we've started to build some capability that maybe wraps Lakebridge, where we use agentic components to not just convert code, but actually let's do deeper validation. Let's make sure we have intent validated. Let's make sure or have it pluggable. And I think part of it as well is making it bespoke to what the customer needs. So we have this AI migration assistant. It's pretty well battle tested now. It's been deployed to multiple customers as part of PS engagements. So we as PS bring that to the engagements. And you can see it kind of follows a sort of well, it's an agentic pipeline. There's an agent that makes decisions about how to route questions, and it tries to put code through this pipeline. So analyzing, understanding the code, and most importantly, obtaining code intent. When you want to think about moving something from a legacy system to Databricks, you maybe want to think about adding a merge instead of a set of upserts or various efficiencies, and keeping the intent of that code. What is this code meant to do? Does make that conversion a lot easier. But then we go into convert, and indeed this is where we can wrap Lakebridge. So we can use the Lakebridge converter, but we can also add custom converters in here. Maybe your use case isn't covered by the Lakebridge suite, and for that conversion we can build our own. We can use agents to do that, and I'll demo some of that later on. And then what's cool about this framework is it can build and run unit tests and also do static checks. So part of the outcome is, yes, we convert a load of code, great. We've got code that works, but what is this code doing what we want? Does this code compile? Is it testable? Is it usable? And the framework runs a lot of this automatically using agents. Lastly, then we have a judge, and the judge, I'll show you the output. The judge can say, cool, you've got converted code, but maybe there's some improvements you want to add. Maybe there's things you've defined the code needs to do, and I'll show you how that looks. And we want to make sure that you can actually follow up on that. And maybe the conversion didn't do what it was supposed to do. And what this judge can do is surface those to your engineers quickly. So right now, in a normal migration, you convert the code, but then every file needs to be looked at in detail. Every piece needs to be investigated. This will surface the sort of highest priority cases to you, whether the conversion just failed for whatever reason. Maybe we don't have coverage for it. It's an edge case. It was written in a way we couldn't interpret. And then it also has the ability to go and fix code it's found that's broken. And hopefully the demo I'll show you, you'll see some fixing happen. I've tried to kind of make it so it will do some fixing. But this is all like pluggable. So we as PS can come in and help define some tools that the agent can use that can make this bespoke to your use case. Things we're working on and things we're adding is, if you imagine that conversion flow is that last slide, but then we're also starting to add things like, let's generate sample data. So, the customer I'm working with at the moment, they don't actually have all the data ready to migrate as we're starting the migration. So we're actually generating sample data for them. We can test the code to a degree based on that sample data. And when the real data arrives, we think we'll be kind of, further ahead. And similarly, that kind of idea of an agent that can run and fix, that loop is still there. So actually running the code on sample data, producing, reports, what did it look like, and actually going in and fixing the code as it finds issues. So these are things in flight. I won't demo this section of it today, just in interest of time. But yeah, this is sort of how we're thinking about tooling. If you jump to the next slide. So yeah, this is from a real customer. This isn't my slide. A real customer produced this. We wasn't us. But just to sort of see the kind of like acceleration we've been able to get from this. That development testing cycle, which was taking weeks and weeks and weeks for them, doing it by hand, and they were using some of their own code converters. But yeah, we were able to get that down to kind of an hour per file. And that comes with that report review, adding some fixes, adding some orchestration. And then, as we said, this is only 20% of the time, right? Then there's the validation process after this. So if we can even cut that 20% down, it can have a huge impact. But let's jump to a demo. Let's see it live.
The most interesting part.
Yeah, and of course, with live demos, there's always a risk. So let's hope this works as we expect it to. So hopefully you can see this.
Yeah, we definitely can.
Cool. So what I've got here, I've got this is a UI for it. The tooling we have can run as a Databricks app. It can run through a notebook. It can run as a CLI. But I've got a UI here we can deploy as a Databricks app. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to load. I've just got an example. I'm going to do an Oracle PLSQL to Databricks PySpark. It's actually a pretty complicated use case that can be often give us some difficulty in converting it. Down here, you see I've just loaded a config file. The config file has all the details of where the files are, what we're going to convert, but I've got these 3 files here that I'm going to convert. Pretty simple Oracle procedures, again, just in the interest of time, making this a nice demo. But you can see it's in SQL. We're creating or replacing procedures, and we're going to ask the agent to convert these. So I'm going to hit start conversion. What we should see the agent spinning up. We should see it find the files we have. And we can actually see the agent decisions as it's processing. So it's made a decision it's going to start analyzing, and we can see analysis running here for these files. Then it's deciding some features to use. So we have a concept here of managing context. We don't want to blow agent context. So it's made some decisions here to analyze it. So it's going to do to compress some context. It's going to go through this analysis phase. It's going to build a plan of what tools it wants to use to convert this code. And once the analysis completes, any second, live demos, we should see it actually start converting. Just down here, I'll just to show you, we've got the agent log. So we actually get full traceability of what the agent's deciding to do, how it's it's trying to parse the code, trying to understand it, and we can see kind of what the agent is actually doing, what full traceability on that. All right, so yeah, it's done.
Maybe a good question, Ian. So it's
yes.
built on Databricks for Databricks.
Correct.
Migration.
Correct. Yes. So it uses Mosaic AI endpoints. So you can call to Claude or anything we surface through our AI gateway. Generally, my experience, the Claude models are the best at this kind of problem. So you can see now it's going through the convert phase. It's converted the code, and it's now running some validation. So that validations are looking at some tests, looking at our kind of target prompt. I'll show you what that looks like after this, and making sure that the code is matching what we expect the output to be. Hopefully this will throw some errors and we will see it go and fix. And this can scale quite, the limitation here around this is kind of what our throughput is on our endpoints. And it has a lot of intelligence behind the scenes to handle things like rate limiting or context management. And if you throw large files at it, it can chunk them so you don't blow your context window when you're working with it. Validation still running. Should take a moment.
Yeah, because usually when speaking to the customers, right, we're speaking about thousands and hundreds of files, sometimes stored procedures and SQL scripts, the couple of pages length. So the tool is designed to handle that kind of loader. So it's not something that basically we vibe coded over the weekend, but this is a battle tested.
No, I mean this is run on tens of thousands of files in a few customers now. So it has scaled. I mean, what we generally do is we run them in batches, and then we can feed the learnings we take from those batches, and we can feed them into the next round of conversion. So there is actually a self-learning capability in the agent. It can look at previous runs, see how well it did, and update its prompts to handle that. Or indeed, you can go and actually give it, code that looks good, and it can do a kind of a RAG, a retrieval augmented generation process, where it brings them in as templates to kind of say this is what good looks like. So you can really do a lot. So the further you go with this, the better the conversions get, and we've seen that happen in customers. Cool. So it's doing some fixes. It's found some issues. It's doing some fixes. It does a little bit. So it's actually adding comments as part of the fixes. So it's trying to even say, I'm going to make this more readable. It isn't just kind of fixing code. And it does this like Claude Code would do, or Genie Code, where it's replacing lines. So we're not reshipping the code back to the LLM every time. We're actually doing in-place replacements here. Hopefully this will finish relatively soon.
And it can it also reference the files from the scripts, right? Sometimes when we have importing, for example, single functions or
Yep.
stored procedures inside the SQL statement, so it can handle this kind of dependencies as well automatically, right?
So it can actually, when that in that planning and analysis stage, it can actually go and find shared libraries and shared functions, and you have the option either to inline them, or it can it can convert those first. So it actually plans the order of conversion. So it can convert shared libraries or scripts first, and then incorporate them into the downstream outputs. So if you've got a shared function, convert that once, then a script that leverages that shared function, that will then be brought into the next part. Should be nearly done, as typical live demos taking longer than expected. So it's done some fix, it's done some revalidating. Importantly here as well, it's got some guardrails, so you can set like token budgets, you can set loop budgets. So the agent doesn't just go and go wild on infinite loops trying to make things work. So lastly, now it's doing a quality check. So you can see for these ones, it's running a quality check, which is the last stage. So it's happy with the fixes, it's making sure the quality looks good, and it's going to produce a report. So we're nearly there. And again, full traceability of what tools are being called where. So we keep decisions, everything. We call some rubrics. So we do actually a lot of deterministic. So this isn't all, I think that's a really important point. This isn't all LLM judging. We actually use things like AST for Python or SQL linters to actually make sure that the code is correct. You can see the quality's flagged an issue. So it's just doing another round of fixes for this one. Or fixes.
Quick question also, maybe in the meantime, while we're waiting for the agent. There's a question from one of the attendees, whether there is any proven success rate that shows how effective the Lake Bridge is at converting the code, especially for PL SQL. So I think we hit the nerve for the PL SQL, but comparing maybe because these two wraps around the Lake Bridge, right? So maybe we can provide the Lake Bridge point of view, and then let's say the agentic tooling point of view.
Yes. So Lake Bridge, I mean, I don't know off the top of my head, but Lake Bridge publishes metrics of like what percentage of a language is handled. It's going to I can't say too much on the roadmap, but we're going to see that quite dramatically improve. But yeah, it covers a percentage of a language. So you will get 80%, 60% conversion. What this is then doing is trying to close that gap to say, okay, for the things that we couldn't deterministically convert or handle in Lake Bridge, we can have the agent come in and actually fix or validate and go over those and get us back to something closer to 100%. And that's the key kind of advantage we get with this tooling. But yeah, Lake Bridge, I mean, they're constantly improving it. We're going to see there's a recently added LLM component to it where you can add custom prompts. So you can sort of throw your own custom prompts at it. It can be better in terms of converting your code. But yeah, they publish sort of, I don't know what it is off the top of my head. I don't know if PL SQL is in the supported languages off the top of my head. Yeah.
But we definitely support PL SQL with the AI agentic tooling, right, which you're showing right now.
Yes, exactly. This is PL SQL. Yeah. Should be finished. Problem with live demos, right? It's taking longer than I expected. We'll see if we had any results. No, not yet. Okay, cool. It's just finished. So you can see here, it's given them all 100% approved. So it went through multiple fix cycles here. It's given us all an approval. And let's actually look at what the results look like. So I'm going to pick this simple one first. So what's cool here is, we can see the from and to, right? So we've got PL SQL here on the left. We've got PySpark on the right. And we can see, we've got a procedure here, load customer data, that's been converted to a PySpark equivalent. And it's written it in native PySpark. This is what I asked it to do. And we can see the insert should have been replaced with yet some writes. So we've actually converted this code. But what is cool about this is this bottom part. So the quality assessment comes in and makes some suggestions. So it's saying, oh, we expected a Unity catalog table name, so 3-part table names. That's not in here. We haven't failed the conversion for that, but that's something for an engineer to come in and look at. But also things like, the transaction control semantics are different. So something, to think about that's different in the way the engine works, because Databricks does things differently to Oracle. So there's some advice to the engineer looking at this to sort of say, well, we should, you should make sure that if you want this behavior, that there's a slight behavioral difference in this converted code. But it's pretty powerful for as we've seen in various migrations, that this is something an engineer can very quickly, once the code's converted, they can zero in on things that have failed, and zero in on things that get a lower confidence score in terms of the quality of conversion. So that's the migration tool as it stands. But one other part I wanted to quickly touch on, because it was such a big part of the earlier conversation on scope, and just some extra features we're trying to build as part of PS, is one part we're locking. So we have Late Bridge Analyzer. Late Bridge Analyzer scans a code base. It infers, a complexity, tries to figure out all the, semantics of your code, where the code lives, what it's doing, and we use that as part of planning. But what we're working on now is taking that a step further. So I've got a new framework, a new set of tools that actually is going to think about planning. And one of the hardest part of doing a migration is the sequencing, right? So you need to understand what tables you can migrate when. Is there a sensible way of batching these tables? Is there a sensible way of actually ordering the migration that will give us the best bang for buck? So I've got some tooling now. This is called Plan, and this will actually analyze the code base, and you can enrich it with profiles from your data source, and it will actually come up with how many tables it's detected, and it will even suggest, as we discussed earlier, what of these can be deprecated? Can we consolidate them? Are they replaced by other tables? Are there tables that are on a critical path that if we don't migrate them soon, it's going to block a lot of downstream consumers? And it comes up with a bunch of views to help, different personas, so what do you want to report to your CTO? We think we can get a 41%, reduction in our estate. But also how do we do delivery planning? So, if I go into this view, we can actually see it's inferred from this code base, and this is on a real code base. I've anonymized it, but this is actually a real customer. It's inferred a whole set of domains, and we can actually see what it might look like to, we just want to migrate, these, we don't want to migrate these domains first. We just want to look at, these X domains, and we have a team size of, 10 engineers, and this incorporates that planning stage, that discovery stage. And I want to have, a 20% buffer. And what does that look like in terms of a migration story? Now, don't take these numbers as real. We're still working on it. But in terms of the capability, this is the kind of thing we're trying to prove out. And there are other things we could do in here. We can look at tables. It actually tags, what kind of table it is. Where does it live in the medallion layer if I were to map it across to Databricks? And even suggests an action. So I migrate it as is. I consolidate it with some other tables. I get things like complexity efforts. I get whether it's a critical path or a bottleneck table. So will it block the table? Will it block the migration? And even things like what the update strategy is. So this is an append-only table. So we're just appending to it every day, but maybe some of them are like full materializations. I'm recreating the table every day, things like that. Lastly, we also build lineage, right? So I can look at a domain and actually see its lineage of what code is feeding what code. So this is the kind of stuff we're trying to bring to the table as part of PS, that we can start to accelerate even that first phase of migration planning. Very early days, we're starting to prove this out. Lots of other things in here. I can look at what our critical path tables are. I can see where there's redundancy. So I found these two different scripts that are essentially duplicates, where there are overlaps, where there's overlapping code. And the idea is we can bring that all into that planning story, and we can iterate on this and come up with a very locked-in data-driven plan rather than kind of going on a spreadsheet of what we think a migration looks like.
I'm always so excited to see the step of the demos that our folks are developing, but I should also maybe emphasize for our audience that your guys probably, it's really fresh from the press. Even I haven't seen this demo in detail, so for me it was quite a surprise. Thank you so much. Super, super exciting. And to be honest, because I work with the partners also on the daily basis, I haven't seen this type of accelerator that exactly would tackle the planning program. So definitely kudos. And dear audience, you also see that for the first time, I guess. Yeah, one of the first.
It's great to see that we're focusing not only on the code conversion part, which is, again, with validation is, let's say, just one chunk of the migration process, but also on the prep side as well, to accelerate it and fully understand in depth, not based on some legacy documentation or just, people knowledge, which might be outdated, but actually look into the actually usage patterns of current system and try to map it what it should be in the next iteration of the platform. So this is pretty incredible. Awesome. So thank you for the demo, and it was great to see as well. And let's say very, very looking forward to already try it out on some of the upcoming migrations with our customers. But I'll say I would love to close maybe this webinar. Thank you everyone for staying with us for that long, right? It was a lot of talking about this migrations. Again, this quite a topic to handle, so it's going to be just short in a few slides. But we try to share our best practices and try to highlight some of the areas and points which definitely worth attention, right, and discussion during the planning stage and during coming up to planning the migration in the future. So maybe it is the last question to you, Olga. Where does professional services might not be an ideal partner actually as well, right? Because there are so many things, so many great, let's say, opportunities where we can help, but maybe there are some where actually might not be that of use.
100%. And indeed, there are cases, right? So number one, small migrations. When you have the migration, which you are sure will be somewhat in 3-4 months, probably again, the amount of risks that you can probably tackle, right, won't be that huge. So that will be probably number one. Number two, if you already have a well-established partner, which matches your cultural fit, right, which you have worked before, right, which ideally understands the domain of your complexity of your business, right, and super important, had previous experiences with the migrations of the data source, probably, yeah, this is where you don't need professional services, or will just engage us on maybe some questions and answers question. And probably, yes, what is other could be still some of the migrations in terms of technological complexity are considered more mainstream, right? For instance, Microsoft SQL could be one of them, or Snowflake. With these regards, you probably don't need that sophisticated tool set that Jon was demonstrating, right? That you can go with the leg bridge, providing indeed that the partner is already with well-established, let's say, proven expertise, right? And have the experience. They're also enabled on the Databricks specific toolset. They're certified Databricks platform, and the migration duration is not that complex. So I think the combination of these three factors is something which I actually would leave me sleeping well, knowing that. In other cases, what I would recommend is always double check with your account team, double check with your engagement manager, with your professional services counterpart, just to be on the safe side. And if this is something that, we can probably provide just the guidance during, maybe 1-2 hour session, that would be the right thing for all of us, just to minimize the risks.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Also, it's always worth still, let's say, discussion point in the beginning, and then we outline the best path and advice on it. Right. With that, I think we're ready to wrap up today's webinar, right? So definitely read the Demystifying Data Warehouse Migrations blog, which Olga and the colleagues wrote as well. It's available in our community blog section. Please don't hesitate to contact your account team, right? We're ready to help on any stage of the journey, starting from the planning phase, business value, business case presentation, execution assurance. So please just talk to us and we'll be able to help. And eventually, we'll share also the recording of this call. If you would like to receive the presentation, please write to us in private, and then we'll share the presentation as well. Thank you very much staying with us. And also the blog is actually linked now in the chat as well by Olga, so you can open out directly. Thank you, Olga. Thank you, Owen, for all the experiences and inputs you provided. It was, I think, very insightful discussion. And I would say I'll definitely recommend it to every customer who is planning the migration in the future as well.
Thank you very much. Thank you for running it, Kirill. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, team.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye.